This time we get to see remarkably powerful hunter cards juxtaposed against a number of less than impressive druid cards. There is one druid card that's looking really fun, but you're gonna love the hunter legendaries.
Huh, this should be interesting.
As noted last time, all the Ashes of Outland cards have now been revealed, so we're looking for synergies within the set as well when reviewing cards now. To look for synergies within each class a bit more effectively, we're reviewing cards that we haven't covered yet from 1 or 2 classes per review. This time, we're looking at the remaining Druid and Hunter cards. As we'll see shortly, there are just a couple impressive Druid cards left, but there are a lot of amazing Hunter cards to look forward to. Spoiler, you may want to skip to the last Druid card and the beginning of Hunter cards if you're just here for the really powerful cards. We'll look at these cards in just a moment, but real quick, let me note that we do card reviews a bit differently here. Rather than the standard 5-star rating for cards, we ask 3 questions Hearthstone players really want to know. First, would the card fit into one of the current meta decks, Tier 1 through Tier 3 decks per HS Replay's tier list? So, is it meta now? This helps gauge the card's power level a bit. Second, will the card fit into a meta deck once the expansion comes out? Meaning, from what we know so far, is it powerful enough to create or support a new meta archetype? So is it meta later? And third, most importantly, does it inspire or enable crazy, experimental, or meme decks? So is it meme deck worthy? Each card will get a yes or no to these questions. There's a time code for quick reviews, with puns, in the description below for those of you without much time. For everyone else, let's get into the main reviews. We already saw what the Druid Prime will be fairly early on, but what other legendary will Druids get? They get Ysel Windsinger, a 9-mana 5/5 with the effect that your spells cost 1 mana. This is the same effect as Aviana from the Grand Tournament, but for spells instead of minions. Aviana was so powerful, especially when paired with Kun the Forgotten King, that she had to have her cost increased to 10 so that she wouldn't overwhelm Wild format, where overpowered combos run rampant. Spells might not be as dangerous to reduce in cost as minions, but if Ultimate Infestation were still in Standard, I doubt this could be released for 9 mana. Druid doesn't really have amazing expensive spells to use with this at the moment, but if they could get Ysel or Malygos to stick on board for a turn and discount the second minion played, Malygos would be able to clear boards and take down opponents with 1 mana swipes and Starfires. In another direction, the Forest Aid doesn't feel bad with this, but there's really not a benefit to play Ysel with it other than getting a 5/5 body for 2 mana more on turn 10. Perhaps this is meant to help support a mostly spells archetype indicated by the Fungal Fortunes card we reviewed in the past. But a 5/5 minion with an effect like this isn't likely to survive to give any extra value on turn 10 or later. In the current meta, this is too slow and situational for Token Druid. Embiggen Druid doesn't have many spells to care about discounting, and this would clutter Quest Druid's hand in the unlikely hope it survives long enough to discount their mid-cost spells the following turn. This would not join any current meta decks. And with the spells coming with this set, it doesn't really look as though there will be much reason to run it later either. Perhaps in a later expansion, but this does not get meta later status for now. As for memes, we could build a deck with Malygos, this, and 2 imprisoned satyrs in the hopes that we discount them enough for swipe to clear the board and let us kill the opponent the following turn. If we play Moonfires before dropping Ysel, as she would actually increase their cost, we could do 21 damage in a turn, or if the discounts split perfectly between Ysel and Malygos, we could do exactly 30 with both swipes and Moonfires. But honestly, it'd just be better to discount a Faceless Manipulator, which would allow for more burst damage for cheaper. Some might say she'd be a meme just to play because she's bad, but I can't give her meme deck worthy status either. So what's the one spell from the set that would feel okay to play as a discounted card with Ysel? Glowfly Swarm is a 5 mana spell to summon a 2/2 Glowfly for each spell in your hand. Many people are comparing it with Force of Nature as a similar effect, but these glowflies are beasts instead, so they don't have the synergy with treant cards. However, it could flood the board even more powerfully on turn 5, and it still supports Garden Gnome and Anubisath Defender. Whispering Woods saw play in many token druid lists for a while, so I think this card has a lot of potential. This would probably fit best into token druid in the current meta, but the current mana curve of the deck is pretty well defined, and I think forcing this into the deck would hurt it a bit. Quest Druid also tends to have a number of spells hanging around, so this wouldn't be too bad in that deck either, but again, it's not really better than other similar costed cards in that deck. This wouldn't quite make the cut in the current meta. However, both of these archetypes are going to lose a few pretty important cards, especially treant synergy cards in Token Druid, so a card like this could slot in quite nicely. Also, with Fungal Fortunes, a much more spell-centric deck may develop that wants to use this. Perhaps King Feoris will see a resurgence, though we won't have Flabidinous Floop as a follow-up anymore. Regardless, this is powerful enough that I'm pretty sure a meta deck will pick it up and use it. What about memes? There's not much to do with the beast tag on the Glowfly, but we could build a 100% spell druid, relying on the power of the quest and buff cards to win the game. This would be vital to that deck as an early board flood and buff target. We'll go ahead and give this meme deck worthy status. When we do focus on building a spell-only druid, what are some other new spells we might consider? Ironbark is a 2-mana spell to give a minion +1/+3 and taunt. And if you have at least 7 mana crystals, this gets discounted for 0 mana. We had Omega cards during Boomsday that cared about if you had 10 mana crystals or more. This and the next card we'll cover are similar, but you get the benefit at 7 mana instead. Honestly, this is not very exciting to take up an entire card slot, and the only great way I can see using the mana discount is together with Gadgetzan Auctioneer to help cycle through your deck faster while building stats on board. While this would help Token Druids stick a minion to the board or protect a couple tokens, this is just too weak to take up a card slot in that deck. And with half the minions in Embiggen Druid being untargetable, and the tiny stat and taunt increase on this compared with everything else in their deck, this wouldn't get to join that deck either. Quest Druid also has much better ways to fill their turn, and this is not worth taking a card slot to include. Even if a spell-heavy druid becomes meta, I don't think this would make the cut. The only time this makes sense as an inclusion is with Gadgetzan Auctioneer, possibly as a way to get to a Malygos OTK. This might earn a slot in that deck, but it's really questionable. I don't think this really has a chance in the new meta either. However, as a way to get to Chef Nomi faster with Gadgetzan Auctioneer, and as help to keep small spell token minions alive in a spell-only druid meme deck, this just barely gets passing marks. It'll get to see a tiny bit of play in meme decks. What's the other druid spell that gets discounted to 0 if you have at least 7 mana crystals? Bogbeam is a 3-mana spell to deal 3 damage to a minion. The artwork is really cool, but this basically has all the same flaws as Ironbark. And especially when looking at this card next to a card like Penance for Priests, paying 3 mana for this in the early game just to deal this damage to a minion would feel terrible. At 7 mana or more, the enemy minions are typically big enough that this 3 damage for 0 mana isn't very exciting. While this can certainly help in clearing a pesky enemy taunt in the way of lethal, none of the current meta decks would be willing to sacrifice another card to put this in. And although there will be fewer cards to choose from once the Year of the Raven cards rotate, this just isn't strong enough to join any deck other than perhaps a Gadgetzan Malygos OTK deck. Sadly, I don't think this will get to join the new meta either. But perhaps Chef Nomi and Gadgetzan Auctioneer will take pity on this card as well to include in their meme deck? We'll go ahead and say this will be a meme to play. How can druids ramp to 7 or more mana even faster in the upcoming expansion? Overgrowth is a 4-mana spell to gain 2 empty mana crystals. Wild Growth was nerfed from 2 mana to 3 mana a while back. Perhaps the balance team at Blizzard wanted this card to have a chance to see play? A number of players would have been pretty salty if druids played Wild Growth on turn 2 into this on turn 3, allowing them to start turn 4 with 7 mana. That would have made the last two cards we reviewed look a lot more appealing, especially with a 0 mana spell to add Taunt to a minion to help recover against aggro decks. It looks as though this card will produce excess mana to draw a card if you're already at 10 mana crystals, so the punish for drawing this in the late game still isn't terrible, but this time you have to pay an extra mana to get the card draw. None of the current meta decks run Wild Growth, which helps ramp mana earlier, so it's extremely unlikely that Overgrowth would make the cut either. As for the future meta, with cards like Breath of Dreams in the class already, it's been difficult for Wild Growth to see much play. Perhaps a huge minions or dragons deck with a ton of mana ramp cards could develop to use this and all the other cards to ensure an early Mishifin Prime dropping on the board. I don't really think that would be able to compete with aggressive decks that will be swarming the ladder together with demon hunters. This is just too slow and expensive for the benefit. However, we will try building a super ramp huge minions meme deck to capitalize on all the ramp available in the class at the moment, and we'll see if it can recover from such a slow start. Overgrowth will help our memes grow. Other than Glowfly, the Druid cards for this time have been pretty disappointing. Is there a good card left to review? The last Druid card for this set looks to have quite a bit of promise. Germination is a 4 mana spell to summon a copy of a friendly minion and give the copy Taunt. Not only is this a cheaper Faceless Manipulator, but it also gives the minion Taunt. While it doesn't allow you to target enemy minions like Faceless Manipulator would, it is 1 mana cheaper, and Taunt is pretty nice if you can get this on a minion with a lot of health left. Quest Druid runs Phlebidnus Floop, which is a way to summon a copy of a minion, but usually the value he gains is in the battlecry of what he copies. Though even without the battlecry benefit, it would be nice to have an extra Ysera Unleashed with Taunt, or taunt up one of the random demons summoned by her portals. A single copy of this might make the cut in place of one of the popular cards that aren't core to the archetype. It would also be pretty interesting to get an additional rushing, taunted copy of a super discounted Mulch Muncher in Token Druid. Some meta decks would seriously consider running this. And the potential with this card is amazing. A number of decks looking to get copies of high value minions will want to include this, even if just using it to get another copy of Archspore Mishifin and shuffle additional primes into their decks. This should be a meta card in the upcoming expansion. So if you thought discounting Malygos and copying him with Faceless Manipulator after discounts with Imprisoned Satyr to have 1 mana for massively buffed damage sounded interesting, how does this sound? What if we use Imprisoned Satyrs to discount Malygos to 0 for certain, and then we make 2 taunted copies of Malygos with Germination for a total of 8 mana, leaving us 2 mana to play spells that have plus 15 spell damage. There aren't actually any 1 or 2 mana spells to do direct face damage at the moment, but if 32 damage from Moonfires isn't enough to finish off the opponent, you'll have 3 Malygoses on board that your opponent will have to deal with unless they want extra damage swipes hitting their face the following turn. This is just one of the many meme possibilities for this card. Let's prepare for some amazing meme experiments. While the majority of the Druid cards this time were underwhelming, quite a few of the Hunter cards are powerful, especially when working together. In a previous review, we already saw Scavenger's Ingenuity, which draws a beast from your deck and gives it a buff. This next spell can buff that beast once it's in your hand. Scrapshot is a 4 mana spell to deal 3 damage. It also gives a random beast in your hand +3/+3. 4 mana to deal 3 damage feels terrible, but at least this damage can go face if needed. The reason this may still see play is bundled into the second effect, buffing a beast in your hand by +3/+3. If it were just one of these effects for half the cost, I don't think they would make the cut in most decks, but bundled together into one card, this may get there. While Dragon Hunter may like another half of Corrosive Breath to help close out games, they hardly run any beasts to get these buffs, and those beasts are either coming down early or closing the game. Neither Highlander deck runs enough beasts for this to be reliable, and this is too slow for Face Hunter. Quest Hunter does run just enough beasts to consider running this, but they'd rather have another token generator than a buff and damage combo like this. Scrapshot doesn't quite make it into the current meta. However, this bundle of effects, paired with the impressive beast minions and a beast summoner we'll be looking at in a moment, makes me think this will have a real chance in the upcoming meta. If not for Scavenger's ingenuity helping draw beasts from your deck, I might not have given this meta later status, but with the improved chances of having beasts in hand, I think this will make the cut. As for memes, yes, we will use this to buff King Crush and the Hunter Prime beast we'll be looking at in just a moment. Using this on King Crush or the Hunter Prime before we duplicate them with Hunting Party or Ramkahin Wild Tamer will make our power plays even crazier. These are going to be great meme experiments. So what's the Prime Hunter we've been alluding to? Zixor, Apex Predator, is a 3-mana 3/4 beast with Rush and a Death Rattle to shuffle Zixor Prime into your deck. Zixor Prime is an 8-mana 4/4 beast with Rush and a Battlecry to summon 3 copies of this minion. 4 total rushing 4/4s for 8 mana isn't bad, but if they have been buffed by Scavenger's Ingenuity or Scrapshot, that's 4 rushing 7/7s for 8 mana. Truly terrifying. With the power of this minion, even without buffs, I believe this would make the cut in both Highlander Hunter decks, and this has excellent synergy with Quest Hunter too. It might not make the cut for current versions of Dragon or Face Hunter, but this definitely would be a meta now card. As for the upcoming meta, the power level of this Prime is off the charts, especially when paired with the buff and draw cards that synergize with this. As this also has Rush, Diving Griffin would also be a consideration to help draw this as well if looking for a few more beasts in the deck. 9 lives might also make it back into standard as a way to get more value from this. This Prime will definitely be joining the future meta. And memes, we're going to flood the board with buffed Zixor Primes as many times as it takes with the help of Ramkahin Wild Tamer and Hunting Party. Let the unending swarm of Warp Stalkers flood the board. Of course, if getting one Zixor Prime shuffled into your deck just doesn't feel broken powerful enough, don't worry. There are quite a few ways to get extras, including this next card. Mok'nathal Lion is a 4-mana 5/2 beast with Rush and a Battlecry to choose a friendly minion and gain a copy of its Death Rattle. Unless you wait till turn 7 to pair this with Zixor Apex Predator, you probably won't pull that combo too frequently, but in a deck with a few decent Death Rattles, this will feel great. I guess it's a good thing Mechanical Whelp will be going to Wild, because this would be busted with that as an option. It would also be overpowered with the Undateka, if he survived a turn. Current meta hunters aren't running many Death Rattles at the moment, so this would be pretty challenging to find a home in a current meta deck. However, a surprising deck where this might actually fit pretty well is Face Hunter. Not only does this have Rush to help clear an enemy taunt, but it can copy the Death Rattle of a Leper Gnome or Kobold Sand Trooper for additional immediate face damage while it trades. With Leroy Jenkins waving farewell, perhaps some Face Hunters would consider running this? It's certainly questionable, but I'm going to say this does make the cut for the current meta. And in the upcoming meta, there are several Death Rattles joining the game that would feel great to use with this. Of course, Zixor is appealing, but so are the other Death Rattle Hunter cards and a couple neutral cards. I wouldn't be surprised if Dragon Maul Sky Stalker, we'll cover later, joins a slower Dragon Hunter build with this. As for meme decks, this can help us get an extra Alar or 2 when paired with 9 lives so that we can fill our board with Phoenixes. And if we really want to go off the deep end, we could use this to summon an extra 7/7 Fellcracked Colossus with Taunt from a Scrapyard Colossus. That's crazy expensive and slow, so it may be too absurd even for a meme deck with 9 lives, but we'll probably try it anyways. There are so many options with a card like this. Let's meme. So, is there a way to get your opponent to help you shuffle extra Zixor Primes into your deck? Yes, there is. The new Hunter secret is Pack Tactics. When a friendly minion is attacked, a 3/3 copy of it will get summoned. Whether it be a Shimmerfly, Phase Stalker, or a much higher value minion, there are a lot of cases where this will feel great to have your opponent trigger for you. Of course, a number of players already play around Snake Trap, so it won't be too difficult to plan around, but this being in the pool will make a lot of opponents sweat at the possibility when planning their turn. Heck, even getting an extra Misha from Animal Companion when you happen to roll the taunt will be nice. Pack Tactics might be a consideration as a replacement for Snake Trap in Dragon or Face Hunter, but I think those both might make better use of multiple minions than a single minion. However, both Highlander decks also run Snake Trap, and this would probably be a quality replacement or addition in both decks. This would see play in the current meta. And as a likely replacement or supplement to Snake Trap in the upcoming meta, I believe this will see play in the future as well. Without Subject 9 in Standard anymore, it will be a bit more difficult to use this in a meme deck. However, if we do go off the deep end with a Death Rattle Hunter and include Scrapyard Colossus, as noted a moment ago, we could play this the turn before in hopes of getting an extra huge follow-up threat when they trade into it. Spell removal or silence on the Scrapyard Colossus would wreck the meme, but we'll probably try it anyways. What else wouldn't feel bad getting a 3/3 copy from Pack Tactics? How about this next minion? Augmented Porcupine is a 3-mana 2/4 beast with a Death Rattle to deal this minion's attack damage randomly split among all enemies. Without any buffs, this is just an okay 3-mana minion to fight for the board. However, if you use Scavenger's Ingenuity, Scrap Shot, or any other buff on this, in hand or on the board, the Death Rattle from this will really punish our opponent. As the Death Rattle damage is split among all enemies, even if your opponent clears this with a spell and no minions on board, they still take a hit. To their face. None of the current Hunter meta decks really use minion buffs at the moment, so this would just be a mediocre 3-drop. Sadly, mediocre cards don't usually get to join meta decks. This would not join the current meta. If Dire Frenzy were still in Standard, this probably would be more appealing. However, even if it were, the other beast cards from the set would probably be better targets. I'm not sure if a deck will evolve to just drop a bunch of beast cards with all the synergy we're seeing at the moment, but if it does, this is a pretty nice 3-drop with an upside in that deck. This can also help clear stealth minions if they become too prevalent in the meta, so there are some considerations for this card. Looking at the other options available at the moment, I'm gonna say that this just barely falls short of meta later, but depending on how the meta develops, there is a chance this will see play. Remember how we talked about duplicating Priestess of Fury during our last review? Well, this card is a lot cheaper, and we can buff it to be a lot bigger pretty quickly. The Spray of Skewers will only be released on death, but if we dump a bunch of buffed porcupines on the board after duplicating them with Ramgahin Wild Tamer and Hunting Party, it'll be fun to see how our opponents respond. It's certainly not the most powerful meme we can use this mix of cards for in the upcoming meta, but it'll still be interesting to try. Now, are the spells we covered earlier the only ways to buff beasts from this expansion? Nope. Our next beast is Hellbore, a 1-mana 2/1 beast with a Death Rattle to give a random beast in your hand +1/+1. As far as 1-drops go, this isn't bad. It dies really easily, but if you've got other beasts in hand, you'd like to trade this into something bigger and get that buff on one of them. This is just a good 1-mana minion. The current meta decks don't run too many beasts, and this doesn't really fit in Quest Hunter as well as Springpaw does. I don't think this would make the cut for current meta decks. However, this and all the other beast synergies do make me think there's a good chance of a mid-range Beast Hunter making a resurgence. Without Springpaw as a 1-mana option anymore, I think there is room for this to make its way into the upcoming meta. There needs to be a deck with quite a few beasts to make this work, but I think it will get there. When looking at meme possibilities, this is another card to buff our beasts in hand, but there's also the risk that it will steal the buff from Scavenger's Ingenuity. In the style of meme deck that cares about what this card is doing, running this would be more of a liability than a benefit. This actually won't get to join meme decks. Up next, we have a fun card. Beastmaster Leorix is an 8 mana 5/5 with a battlecry to summon 3 beasts from your hand. If one of those beasts happens to be Tundra Rhino, all 3 of them can charge as soon as they hit the board. Do note that many of the beasts we've covered for this expansion have battle cries that you'd prefer to get, but if you'd rather not pay full price to get them into play, Beastmaster Leorix will help get them in play. At 8 mana, and with the way they're built now, none of the current meta decks would want to run this guy, so he's not a current meta card. However, even if he's just dumping a few 3 or 4 cost beasts onto the board alongside himself, he'll still be a powerful play. Tundra Rhino and King Crush combinations with him probably won't be reliable enough to survive as meta decks, but with some fine tuning, I think a few mid-range Beast Hunter decks will be able to use him really effectively. I believe he will be a meta later card. And oh, the memes we can do with this. We've got lots of different combinations to try out with Beastmaster Leorix in meme decks, but the one that I'm most excited about is King Crush with Scavenger's Ingenuity, Scrapshot, Ramkahin Wild Tamer, and Hunting Party. If just one buff card hits King Crush and we're able to play 2 of our Beast duplication cards, we'll be able to summon 3 charging 11/11 King Crushes onto the board at once to devastate our opponent. Jurassic Park, eat your heart out. So, is Beastmaster Leorix the only way to summon a bunch of beasts onto the board at once? Nope. Hunters also get Nigran Slam, a 10 mana spell to summon 4 3/5 Cleft Hoofs that attack random enemies. Facing down a stampede of these Cleft Hoofs would be pretty frightening. And if your opponent doesn't have any minions on the board, all of these Cleft Hoofs will go face right away. This is really expensive at 10 mana, but the one meta deck that runs Zul'jin at the moment, Secret Highlander Hunter, might consider running this if they had access to it. It would also provide quite a few tokens for buffs or late game quest completion in Quest Hunter. But I'm not sure if they would choose to use this. Maybe as a replacement for Boommaster Flark, as the potential immediate damage is higher? In any event, I think Secret Highlander Hunter would consider it due to the synergy with Zul'jin. And in the upcoming meta, we won't have Zul'jin to get extra value from this, but perhaps Highlander decks will still consider using this as a board cleanup or finisher if Dino Tamer Bran doesn't quite get there. Again, Quest Hunter might consider it as well. It's really expensive at 10 mana, but the immediate impact and potential to stick a few decent-sized bodies to the board make me think it will be worth running at least one copy of this in a meta deck or two. If Spirit of the Lynx were still in Standard when this comes out, we could buff these Cleft Hoofs to be even bigger, but there's not much we can do with this as a 10 mana card. I mean, we could use Scarlet Webweaver to discount a Starving Buzzard to 0 mana and draw 4 cards with this as we slam the board with it, but that's an overcomplicated mess just to draw a few extra cards. And it wouldn't even expedite dropping Chef Nomi by much at all. Sadly, this doesn't inspire or enable any exciting or experimental decks. The last card for Hunters is their Imprisoned Demon. Imprisoned Felmaw is a 2 mana 5/4 demon that starts as dormant for 2 turns. When it awakens, it attacks a random enemy. 5/4 in stats for just 2 mana is exciting, but when you have to wait 2 turns and then it randomly charges into a poisonous or 4 attack big body, that's not so exciting. Of course, that's the worst case scenario, but I can't think of too many scenarios where a hunter would be excited to spend 2 mana so that one of their minions can attack a random target 2 turns later. The stats are nice, but the unreliability hurts a lot. If you could guarantee this would go face when it wakes up, perhaps Face Hunter would be willing to sacrifice their turn 2. But even then, I think they'd prefer to play one of their other 2-drops for faster impact. The random attack aspect makes me think Highlander Hunter wouldn't really want this either. With Frenzied Fellwing, if there were some demon synergy that hunters could benefit from, this might have a chance, but none of the current meta decks would want this. And I'm pretty sure this will face the same challenge in the upcoming meta as well. There wasn't a dormant synergy card released, and the potential for this to just flop after waiting 2 turns kills the chances for this card. So can we make a Demon Hunter? With this and the neutral demons that'll be available, we could make an entirely demon and spells deck. It won't be good, but I suppose it may be worth a few games to do some naming pun meme decks as well. Anyways, that was the last card. Now, onward to the quick reviews. Ysel Windsinger has to keep singing to the wind, because no one in the current meta, future meta, or meme decks find her abilities appealing. Glowfly Swarm would lose to Treants in the current meta, but it should light up some future meta decks, and excite a swarm of spells in meme decks. Ironbark's bark is worse than its bite for current or future metas, but perhaps it can serve as a cooking pan for Chef Nomi memes? Bogbeam misses all targets in the current and future metas, but Gadgetzan Auctioneer takes pity on this, asking it to at least heat up pans for Chef Nomi. Overgrowth would be chopped down in the current or future metas, but may provide fertilizer for some massive meme decks. Germination would take root in the current meta, and it will flourish in the upcoming meta and memes. Scrapshot would miss the current meta, but can gather enough ammunition for the future meta, and buffs some frightening beasts to be duplicated in meme decks. Zixor, Apex Predator, would be a prime inclusion in several current meta decks, will rush into upcoming meta decks, and stands at the apex of meme decks. Mok'nathal Lion would copy Kobold Sandtroopers and Leper Gnomes in the current meta, will pounce on value in the upcoming meta, and lets beasts transform into phoenixes in meme decks. Pack Tactics would dominate Snake Trap in a couple current meta decks, will gang up on opponents in the future meta, and will pull together some silly Death Rattle memes. Augmented Porcupine isn't pointed enough for the current meta, just barely fails to get augmented enough for the future meta, but will provide some entertaining sprays of skewers in meme decks. Hellbore would lose to Springpaw in the current meta, but it may feed mid-range beast hunters climb back into the new meta, and meme decks wish this boar wasn't a beast itself. Beastmaster Leorix wouldn't have enough beasts to summon in the current meta, but he can corral beasts in the upcoming meta, and he's going to enable triple King Crush memes to trample our opponents. Nagran Slam would slam the board twice with Zul'jin's help in the current meta, and 4 Clefthoofs are a powerful finisher or board clear for upcoming Highlander or Quest meta decks. But other than really overcomplicated combos doing almost nothing, there's not much meme potential to this card. Imprisoned Felmaw would be stuck in its cage during the current and future metas, but it does enable hunters to play Demon Hunter memes. And that's a wrap. We still have lots more cards from Ashes of Outland to look at, and the reviews for those are coming soon. If you enjoyed, be sure to tap that like button, smash that subscribe button, and share your perspective in the comments below. You're awesome. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.